This is my favorite Rush album. It used to be the used to be the banner of the AOD page before the Cybermen invaded. The reason I consider it my favorite Rush album is the sonic textures on this album have to be my favorite of the entire discography. A lot of the appeal of Rush to me was the science fiction, fantasy, genre prevalence of their lyrical themes, and I feel as though this was the album where it was most prevalent, but also most grounded in real world concerns. It brought these kind of dystopian themes toward closer to a present day reality at that time, 1984. If you wanted to, you could perceive Grace Under Pressure as an entire concept album, a 2112 of two sides with several different disparate stories about individuals dealing with this post-apocalyptic nightmare. It's a beautiful. It's what one might call nuclear wave. It's these guys in their 30s doing a OMD-esque album about existentialism and growing old and being concerned about the future after the 70s seemed so bright, and now the Cold War fears of the 50s and 60s are coming back, threatening to reduce the world to another lost generation. It is interesting to me that many older Rush fans of the 70s found their 80s work distasteful. They felt Signals was a step perhaps too far in the pop direction. Certainly by Hold Your Fire, I can understand why they felt this way. Maybe even Power Windows. But this album feels like a conscious attempt after Signals to return to what a lot of the older fans enjoyed about their music, guitar-oriented and the kind of geeky lyrical themes. Although I guess they assumed everyone would be just the opposition to the synthesizer-laden music, I suppose, just really rubbed people the wrong way. And they were going for something more akin to soundscapes and maybe an art rock sort of new age sort of sound where it's more about mood than the old progressive rock kind of dynamism and the kind of, you know, these kind of bouncy odysseys which they take you on Hemispheres or Farewell to Kings, Progressive Steel 2112. This is less of a dynamic, youthful adventure, it's more of a contemplation, the despair of growing old by comparison. And I think it's one of those interesting adventures you can go on in a 1980s LP. Don't get me wrong, it's not that pleasant and happy, but in terms of the function that 1970s progressive rock albums are serving as, you know, an Emerson, Lake and Palmer or a Genesis, Gentle Giant release, they take you on this strange, fantastical journey into a strange new world you could never potentially visit in the real world. And the elasticity of the music meant that you could forge it to whatever you liked, beyond the limits of even a novel. But there was such a, the 70s progressive rock albums, that you couldn't really consciously do that again in the 80s. I mean, unless you wanted to be Marillion or something like that with Misplaced Childhood. But you had to be, the progressive rock of the 70s did come from a place of earnestness and sincerity and hope, optimism after the 1960s, these grand, transcendental, higher states of human exceptionalism, human growth, and expansion, very baroque. By the 80s, this just didn't seem as earnest or sincere an expression anymore. But where that energy was channeled into creating those altered states of being via an LP, opening up another dimension, new brain salad surgery, 10, 11 years on, but with the concerns with coming from the place of 1984, and the concerns of 1984, and getting at, well, the progressive rock didn't bring about a utopia. Where are the urges which led to the progressive rock, where are they leading us creatively now? They led us to Grace Under Pressure. Insofar as an album can be like a portal into another dimension, an experience into some genre fantasy, it's like reading a novel or experiencing someone's fiction in the form of 8 songs or so. Grace Under Pressure fulfills this as well as effectively and in a manner that I find is really listenable, especially re-listenable. I've listened to this album over 100 times, I suspect. I come back to it so much and I enjoy it slightly more each time. I can't ignore this. It's not even one of the most necessarily impressive albums I or anyone else has ever heard. It's very, very, very impressive, but the thing that's most impressive about it is not in terms of musical composition or innovation, let's say. It's something about how much I want to return to this album, how captivating and interesting I find this album. That's the key. A glorious piece of geek realism if I've ever experienced it.
The track list, I think, is quite straight. It's more the overall production, which is, and the sequencing, which makes this an amazing experience, I think. Yeah, it's not that every individual song is one that if it came on the radio, you would think, oh, this is one of the greatest things you've ever heard. Some of them are, though. All side B is. I'll say that. Distant Early Warning, I think, could be a little bit better, mainly the chorus. Afterimage, perhaps, also there's a chorus problem. Red Sector A is one of the best things the band ever recorded, far and away. The Enemy Within, I also think, is a chorus problem. Rush sometimes have chorus problems. I don't know if it's just Geddy Lee, or they haven't... I don't know if they know how to write a vocal melody, or like delivering Neil's lyrics and Geddy... I don't know, something about it. I don't know. Well, we'll have an idea.
But I sometimes suspect that this is the Rush album which non-Rush fans who are just kind of, music snobs, they like, 80s pop and synths, OMD, that sort of thing. I do too. It's part of why I like this stuff as well, because it's Rush doing committing to exploring two worlds, two universes. What happens on this album is, if you can get past Geddy Lee's voice and maybe Neil Peart's sometimes silly lyrics, you'll find that, oh wow, I said this in Power Windows if you're repeating myself here. This is only meant to be a quick video. We can appreciate the sincerity and the adaptability of this interesting and, as it turns out, highly imaginative, compositionally progressive rock band. If I had to nominate a single most interesting album within the Rush studio discography, it has to be this one, 1984's Grace Under Pressure.